Now, to get the most damage possible out of this strategy, you'll need a copy of Trident Dragion. So make sure to check your collection to see if you have one, and ask a friend if you don't, and ask a friend if you don't, and ask a friend if you don't.
For this build of Tenpai, you don't need to have any friends. What's up guys, this is Tcg Sam here, and in today's video, I'm coming at you guys with my undefeated Trident Dragion deck that I took to a Rarity Collection box tournament. I went undefeated in it. But I did all that without playing Trident Dragion or even like the Link OTK Zelantis package in the extra deck. So I think it just goes to show like you don't really need those cards to actually do well in this deck. Anyways, without any further ado, let's just hop straight into this deck profile. So like I mentioned, there's no Trident Dragion here, but the Tenpai engine is very standard. It's just going to be 3 Pydra, 3 Chandra, 2 Fadra, 3 Kaiman, 3 Summoning, and 1 Terraforming. Nothing to explain about these ratios at all. This is all very standard. And then 3 copies of Pot of Prosperity for the consistency. I chose not to play Desires because I was playing a bigger Kashtira package. For the Kashtira package, I played 1 Wraithsoth and 3 Fenrir. Now these were definitely the MVPs of my deck. Fenrir is just such an insane card, especially when you don't have Trident Dragion, because it's able to apply a lot of pressure when going second. It does 2400 damage and clears out a potentially problematic body that your other monsters wouldn't be able to run over. And it just makes it so every time like I dropped it, like I was trading so well into my opponent's boards. When I was forced to go first, I would drop it and it'd be a nice form of interruption. And I decided to play Wraithsoth to bump the number up a little bit because we have Terraforming as well, meaning we have 5 copies of Fenrir in the main deck. Plus I do side some more Kashtira cards, so I just think that the Kashtira engine is incredibly good, especially if you don't have Trident, like I mentioned. But even if you do, I just feel like this is too good not to play, and it's very good in those simplified game states that you get to when you're constantly hand-trapping your opponent back and forth. Gets you free discard off a card like Summoning, and just applies so much pressure even on its own. And then for the non-engine, it's just going to be 3 copies of Ash Blossom, 3 copies of Mourner, 3 copies of Ghost Ogre, 3 copies of Imperm, and then for my specific locals, I chose to play 3 copies of Droll. There's a couple of Voiceless Voice and random combo decks there that I just didn't want to lose to, but if you do choose to take this deck to another tournament, you may want to play something a little bit less targeted, so something like Effect Veiler or something like that. And then the final non-engine card was 3 copies of Droplet. This card was also the second MVP of the day today. This card just helps you break so many boards, and especially with a card like Fenrir generating you so much free advantage, you're able to essentially always send 2 or 3 with no problem at all, and essentially just negate your opponent's entire board. That's it for the main deck. It was 40 cards. Nothing too spectacular, but going on into the extra deck, playing 1 copy of Heavenly Spheres. This is your best turn 1 end board. I don't play the Ancient Fairy package. I haven't tested it too much, but I think you could choose to play it. I figured Seals plus like a bigger cash engine that I was tied into was plus hand traps was good enough, and most of the time it was. I chose to play 1 copy of Doolittle Chimera. This is sort of like the budget alternative to the Link OTK package with Zelantis and Salamangreat Raging Phoenix, because what you can do with this is play under a card like Simo Archfiends and D-Barrier, because you're boosting all your monsters I found to attack and defense. You can link two off for this, go battle phase, use Kaiman, bring out Chandra, attack, Doolittle attack, Chandra summon Fadra, bring a guy back, and that's just enough for game. It didn't come up, but in theory, it's pretty good when you do get Barriered or Simo Archfiend. 1 copy of Hida, you are playing a fire deck, and it is pretty good into a lot of the decks because every deck plays Ash Blossom. You can use that to climb into Promethean Princess. Although I never made it, I do think it's still pretty solid in this deck because it means later on in when you run out of a card like Fadra, or if you have just a bunch of random bodies on the board, you can turn this back into something that's valuable, like an actual Tenpai that you want. So I think it's pretty good to play. And then I did play 1 copy of SP Little Knight. I didn't end up playing Striker Dragon because I wanted to try out a couple of different things in the extra deck. It's kind of ironic because SP is worth more than Trident Dragion. But you don't necessarily need SP as well. If you don't play SP, it won't really matter that much anyways, because most of the time you're making SP, you're in a fairly poor spot anyways. If you have to go SP, it means you got like Barriered or Simo Archfiend or something, and a lot of the times you can just make do with another copy of Seals. So if you want, you can play a 2nd copy of Seals, or just cut this entirely. 1 copy of Black Rose Moonlight Dragon, 1 copy of Kui Belt, 1 copy of Odd Eyes Meteor Burst, and 1 copy of Black Rose. I think these are all fairly standard for the most part. I think all of them come up in different situations. Maybe the most cuttable one is Kui Belt, because Kui Belt is somewhat interchangeable with Moonlight, because a lot of the times the monsters that are hard for you to out by battle can just be outed very easily by Moonlight Dragon, and plus it bounces it back, so it won't trigger like any effects in the graveyard that they might get when they get popped. But aside from that, I feel like Kui Belt's still solid enough to play in the deck, and you do have a little bit of flex space now that I'm not playing the Link OTK package or Trident Dragion. Mirror Burst is very good for the mirror match, and Black Rose is one of the MVPs you just make under summoning all the time, just clear your opponent's board. And then 2 copies of Trident Dragion. I think 2 is fairly standard now, especially with a card like Cashier Unicorn still somewhat prevalent. I think it's very important to be able to have 2 copies of Biden, but also there are going to be times where you don't kill them, and then on the crackback you need another copy. And then for the 10s, I played 1 copy of Transcendent Dragion. In hindsight, I probably will choose to bump this up to 2 in the future since we're not playing Trident Dragion. This is sort of like the big boss monster that you can make in the battle phase, and it's very hard for your opponent to deal with, especially when you pair it with a card like Songen Summoning, because you can just summon this during main phase, go battle phase, and your opponent can't do anything, and they just die pretty much whenever this hits the board. Maybe play top 2 player on a card like Cashier Unicorn as well. For the other 10s, I did choose to play 1 copy of Time Lord Progenitor Vorpgate. I wanted to try it because I felt that there were going to be times where you couldn't clear your opponent's entire board, or you didn't want to with a card like Black Rose. And Vorpgate is pretty solid because it has an interaction with Bident, where if you go Vorpgate and then Bident afterwards, you're locked into Dragon, so your opponent's monsters actually don't come back, which is pretty good. Never came up today, but in theory, it's supposed to be pretty solid. 1 copy of Ruddy Rose Dragon. It is sort of like an alternative to playing a card like Dispatter or Trident Dragion, because it's a big level 10 that you can make that's not Transcendent Dragion. And I think it has a very solid effect. There are going to be times where you can't necessarily kill your opponent, but clearing out the graveyard essentially means they can't do anything on the crackback. And of course, it has a pretty relevant effect as well to protect against destruction. So I definitely would say, like, even if you have Trident, you might want to try this card out. Then the last card in my extra deck, I was trying 1 copy of Ty-Phon as well. You probably don't need Ty-Phon, but I thought that Ty-Phon could be pretty solid. It didn't really come up, and I think in the future I'd probably cut it for something else, maybe another copy of the Transcendent Dragion. That was it for the extra deck, 15 cards, no Trident needed. It didn't really come up at all for me today. Like, I won all my games pretty cleanly for the most part, and I didn't feel like I needed Trident in any of those cases. For the side deck, I guess it's somewhat interesting. I chose to play 2 copies of Unicorn and 1 copy of Birth. So I would always side this in when I anticipated I was going first, or if I chose to go first, because there were times I did choose to go first, sort of as like a mind game, but also because I had a lot of side cards against a specific deck. Then I would just put this in, and it'd be a very strong going first engine, because Unicorn as a standalone card is actually 2 interruptions, because you can just summon it at birth, activate Birth, and this is banish 3 from the graveyard. This is rip 1 from their extra deck, which can be incredibly strong considering opponents' extra decks aren't really set up to handle Unicorn anymore. Chose to play Shifter as well. I sided in a couple times today, but I didn't see it. For the back row removal, 1 Duster and 2 Lightning Storm. A lot of decks have been maining this, but I felt that I wanted to just have cards that were good both going first and second, just in case I ran into the mirror match. And then 2 copies of Cosmic Cyclone just for some extra back row removal. And then for the hard going first cards, I played 1 copy of Quackimera Drago. Very good against the light and dark decks. You can just summon it off of seals when you tribute it. And then finally 3 copies of D-Barriers, probably one of the best normal traps in the format right now. So that's going to do it for the deck profile. Let me know what you thought about it in the comment section below. Once again, like, I never needed Trident Dragion. Yes, it would be nice sometimes, but you have so many ways to just game your opponent otherwise that you don't really need it to play at the most competitive level. So don't worry if you don't have Trident Dragion. Don't worry if you don't have any friends either to borrow Trident Dragion from. You can still play this deck very competitively. So with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.